Hello everybody, welcome to today's video. Today we are going to talk about aviation industry and we are going to do a deep dive into the entire industry. Okay, this is going to be a very interesting video and I would request all of you to watch it till the very end. We are going to talk about insights, information and some fun facts during the entire conversation. Also, without any further delay, let us jump into what are the three things that we are going to talk about today. The first one being costs. The second one, what are the various revenue streams for these airlines companies? And the third one, what are the current trends in these airlines companies? Okay. Before we jump into the topics, I wanted to start off with an example. Indigo Airlines 7:30 a.m. flight from Delhi to Bombay. Okay. Assume that the total revenues that it will make by selling seats on that flight is around 2 lakhs. And the cost to run that particular flight is 1.5 lakh. So the profit for Indigo's 7:30 a.m. flight from Delhi to Bombay is 50,000 rupees. Okay, this is nothing but computing profitability at an individual flight level, flight route level. 7:30 a.m. Delhi to Bombay. The flight and route combination is what is used to compute profitability of an airlines company. Right now, individual, if you take for example Indigo, there are thousands of flight route combinations, right? Each one of the elements is individually assessed for computing the profitability. And they all are grouped together to finally say that, hey, yes, Indigo has made 200 crore profit or 500 crore profit in the past 1 year. Hope this makes sense because we are going to use this logic going forward. Okay. Now, let us jump into the first factor, that is cost. Well, Virgin Atlantic Airways CEO, Mr. Richard Branson, famously said that, hey, if you want to be a millionaire, the fastest and the easiest way is start being a billionaire and then invest in an airlines company. You will absolutely become a millionaire. Right? This is such a difficult business to run. Some of the biggest big shots, right? We all know Vijay Mallya. He started with Kingfisher and he absolutely lost every single thing, right? It's not very easy to run an airlines company. The fixed costs to run an airlines company are absolutely high. Let's start off with the first component of the fixed cost. That is purchasing an aircraft and financing the aircraft itself, right? You might not be running flights. In the last 2 years because of COVID, many of these airline companies did not run flights, but they still need to pay their monthly EMIs. Because they bought a flight on financing, they have to pay their EMI. Doesn't matter. And these are huge expenses. Okay, so that's one of the biggest fixed costs. When we say fixed cost, we mean that that's a cost incurred even if you run a flight or does not run a flight. That's number one. The second one, even if you run a flight or if you don't run a flight, doesn't matter. You still need to maintain that flight. So maintenance cost is the second biggest fixed cost source. Okay. Now moving on, the operational costs. That is to run a 7:30 a.m. flight from Delhi to Bangalore or Delhi to Bombay, Indigo needs to put some fuel in its tank. Right? So fuel is one of the biggest operational costs. The second operational cost, to run that flight, you need to have certain crew on that flight too, right? You need to have pilots, you need to have people who are helping you check in bags, you need to have people who are in the cabin, right? Flight attendees, all these people add up to the labor cost, which is again significant amount. These are some of the biggest operational costs and also your fixed costs. There are also other costs involved, right? For example, your airport fees. To land in a particular airport, you need to pay landing fees. To get into a particular terminal, you need to pay terminal fees. A lot of these airport handling charges also add up very quickly. So all in all, this is a very expensive affair and you need to have a lot of capital to even get into this industry. And that's the reason why Mr. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala got into this industry. Okay, we'll talk about it more in the next part of the video. But moving on right now, we'll talk a bit about the revenues. We started off the cost with a fun factor. Let's start off revenues as well with a fun fact. Okay, 10% of the entire flight capacity is typically reserved for business class, but 75% of the revenues come from this 10% of these business class customers. Let me repeat it. 90% of the flight is reserved for economy guys, and these economy guys only contribute to 25% of the overall revenues of a flight, right? So that's a very interesting factor. Because of the COVID, the business travel is going down. So a lot of the revenues that come from business class customers is going down. So it would be interesting to see how organizations would cope up with this. So the first factor is passenger ticket sales itself. The second factor is your cargo. A lot of airlines now, specifically Korean airlines, very clearly mention that now it's more profitable to run a cargo flight when compared to a passenger aircraft. So a lot of aircrafts are now focusing their entire business in the cargo segment. Okay, that's the second source of income for these flights. And the total amount of income in this segment depends on the number of goods that you are transferring and the distance that you are transferring and also the timing of the transfer. For example, if a particular customer wants a package to be sent faster, of course they pay more. But if they don't care about the timing, they pay less. So three factors that influence your cargo revenues are: one, the absolute number of goods, the total distance transferred, and the timing of the transfer. The third revenue stream is your insurance. Okay, insurance is basically about, hey, if you lose your baggage, then please do take this insurance and we'll give you the complete amount as reimbursement. Then if you miss your flight, we'll probably pay your reimbursement, right? So these are some of the insurance packages that are being provided by the airlines companies itself. And finally, there are a lot of ancillary revenue products, which are entertainment, in-flight Wi-Fi, in-flight food, and excess baggage. All these also add up to a significant level. But not to forget, the most important one is your passenger airfare, the tickets, the number of tickets sold for a particular flight route combination. That determines how much money an aircraft is actually making. Okay, now moving on into the third segment, that is the trends. This is very interesting. The first trend that we are going to talk about is the implications of COVID. We already talked that, hey, the business class travel is disrupted quite a bit. But let us start off with a fact. So in 2022, the airlines industry revenues are expected to be 65% of what it used to be in 2019. So even in the best case scenario in 2022, airline industry as a whole has still lost 1/3 of its value compared to pre-COVID levels, while every other industry has already reached back to its pre-COVID levels. Airlines industry is still way off its mark, and we don't even know if the recovery is going to happen anytime soon. The second interesting thing that's happening because of COVID is that the entire ancillary industries, the industries that are associated with airlines, right? For example, your hotels, your car rentals, your restaurants, all these industries are also bogged down. Hertz, one of the biggest car rental companies, has filed for bankruptcy. Some of the biggest hotel chains in the world have filed for bankruptcy. Some of the biggest restaurants, fine dining restaurants in the world, have started to shut the store. And we don't even know if they'll recover ever. Right? So these are some of the changes that have happened because of the entire pandemic. The second trend, or the second thing that I want to talk about in the current trends, is about the competition that's happening currently in this entire industry. With respect to the Indian economy, there are a lot of players that are trying to get to that air passenger ticket, right? The first one being your Indigo. Indigo is already a well-established low-cost carrier in the country. They have optimized every single thing to the possible extent, and still they want to remain at that particular level. They are already offering at the lowest price possible, and if with new players coming in, probably they'll be even more aggressive. Right? The second one is Mr. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala's bagged Akasa is launching its operation in 6 months from now. Right? That will be a very specific and interesting move that the whole industry is watching. And to say it out loud, this is also a low-cost carrier. So how Indigo is going to react is another interesting thing. The third one is the entire acquisition of Air India by Tata Group. Well, Tata Group, being such an efficient company, acquiring a Sarkari airline is a fun thing to watch. Right? The fourth thing is Vistara. Vistara, being a Tata Group plus Singapore Airlines company, how would that tackle? Right? For example, if there is a 7:30 a.m. flight from Delhi to Bombay from Vistara and also by Air India, now each one of them is eating into others' revenues. So there is no point in running both these flights. So we need to see what are the implications on Vistara. Right? Then Jet Airways, which has also been in the bankruptcy, is planning to make a comeback. There are a lot of other airlines already in the mix. So you can see 4 or 5 players potentially vying for that one single passenger ticket. Right? So it will be a very interesting competition dynamics that are going to happen in the next few years. So if we talk about some of the interview questions that you might get, right? The first probable interview question if you are attending an investment banking interview is, hey, what is your opinion about Tata's acquisition of Air India? Right? The first one being that, hey, there is a lot of legacy attached to this particular acquisition because the Air India was first launched by Tata itself pre-independence. So there is a lot of legacy and also emotional value in this entire acquisition. The second one being that, hey, Tata very clearly mentioned that they want to focus on the international routes. Right now, Air India is operating to GCC, that's the Gulf countries, Middle East, and also African nations. But folks don't prefer to take Air India compared to the carriers from UAE, such as Etihad, Qatar, or any other airlines, right? Because these are considered to be premium airlines and the cost is almost similar to Air India. So Air India is aggressively pushing to ensure that, hey, they give the best customer service possible and they also want to project themselves as the premium air carrier in the GCC or international route. That's number one. The second one being the legacy. And the third factor being that, hey, Air India is already making sure that they want to move away from the routes which are not very profitable. We initially talked about, hey, every single route and the flight combination, right? If it is 7:30 a.m. flight from Delhi to Bombay, right? So at that level, Tata wants to analyze every single route of Air India and say that, hey, yes, this is a profitable route, so I want to continue with that route versus not. So the operations are going to be streamlined to the maximum extent possible. So we talked about legacy, then we talked about focus on international routes, then we also talked about improving the operations itself. So these are some of the factors that you can mention in the interview. On top of it, you can also talk about the numbers. For example, Tata Group's overall revenues are around $100 billion. The revenues for 2020-2021 were around $100 billion. And this acquisition was a $2.5 billion acquisition. So in the grand scheme of things, this is not a bigger amount for Tata. But if these guys want to succeed in its entire acquisition, then they need to pump in a lot more of money, right? So probably the stakes for Tata are not very high from a economics or ROI standpoint, but on a grander scheme of things, this has a lot more of notional value attached to it. Okay, that said, let's move into a potential interview question from a consulting firm. Right? This is about, hey, Pawan, this is an airlines company ABC, and these guys are struggling with profitability over the last few years. What are some of the factors that you will look at? Right? You can start off immediately with the first thing that we talked about, right? You will look at what is the yield, what is the profitability of every single flight route combination. Then you will look at the productivity of every single employee. If there is a possibility for you to go with 4 cabin crew members, you will do that instead of 5 cabin crew members, right? So productivity is a huge thing. The third factor that you will also look at is there a way for you to actually increase prices? We don't talk about increasing prices, but we already know that the biggest revenue source for any airlines company is its passenger ticket sales. So increasing the ticket price itself on certain routes might not be a bad idea if there is no competition. So you also need to check that. However, these are all short-term measures, right? Increasing the productivity, increasing the ticket price, increasing the profitability on flight route combinations. All these are short-term things. But you should also be looking at long-term things, such as the culture of the organization. The culture of the organization could be such that today the employees might be thinking we are flying planes, but you need to be thinking we are actually flying people, right? That's a very interesting shift in the mindset for the employees. So you can talk about these kind of things when you are in a consulting interview, that and answering a question around increasing the profitability of a company. Now we talked about a lot of things, guys. We talked about P&L statement. How do you compute P&L for an airlines company? Then we talked about costs. Of course, the biggest one being the EMIs, monthly EMIs that these guys need to pay to their financiers. The next one we talked about is revenues. The biggest one being the business class revenues. We don't know how it's going to span out in the next few months and few years. Right? Finally, we talked about the current trends, the competition that's brewing within the Indian space, and also the COVID implications. I hope this is helpful, guys. This is a very quick summary of the entire aviation industry, and I hope this will be helpful for you and act as a quick guide in your interview preparation. Please do share it with your MBA friends. Please do share it with your undergrad friends, whoever is preparing for an interview, and it will come in very handy. Okay, so you and I, both of us, will receive some good karma. Thanks, guys. Please like the video and let me know if you want me to make more such videos on other industries. Take care. Bye-bye.